Okay, so 2020 Goodreads reading challenge. I set for 100 books. I finished 150. So 2021 reading challenge, I was like, oh, I got this. 150 books is my new goal. I finished 70. I finished 70. And I've come to terms with that because the last 2 years have been years. They've been some years, okay? Other things have taken, I won't say precedence, but they've taken more of my time to deepen their quality. Like I've learned a lot via GeoGuessr. I've stopped reading more. I've read less fiction books and I've read more nonfiction books, or I've started reading more nonfiction books. Gradually, YA and mystery thrillers have kind of like slowly phased out. Not so much mystery thrillers as YA, but obviously YA because I'm a grown ass adult, not a young adult. I'm older than 30. YA is just not hitting like it used to, obviously. Um, anyway, I read 70 books. Nowhere near the goal I set for myself, but I have come to terms. I have come to terms. These last 3 months, I didn't read a lot. Okay, October I read 6 books. November I read 4 books, and December I read 2. And when I said read, I mean finished. I finished in those months because I've been reading books, and I still have many books that are mid to near completion that I just haven't finished. Um, but I've come to terms with that. So what I decided to do for 2022, because it makes sense in some fashion, was say, you know what, I'm gonna go back one step since I wasn't able to hit 150. I'm gonna go back and say going back to 100, but then I'm also gonna add the difference of what I wasn't able to hit. So that was 180. What sense that makes, who knows? But that's what 2022 is looking like. I've already read 2 books. They are graphic novels, and I'm okay if the majority of this year ends up being graphic novels because I do have a backlist. And besides me having a backlist, I don't necessarily have a lot of books to request. That's another issue. Is that maybe I would have finished if there were more books being published or put out, as opposed to books being pushed back because of pandemic publishing related issues. Um, so I didn't necessarily read as many graphic novels as I might have, or children's or middle grade whatever books as I might have, because those are also fun sometimes. Often, a lot of times, whatever, and they're also quick reads. Sometimes there were shorter books that are just adult books, shorter science fiction. I have a couple of short story collections I didn't finish. So primarily, my main goal is to finish my NetGalley queue. I do have one book. It's not even one book because it's only the first half of a book because it's a reference book. I do have one book uh, from like 2020 that I need to finish still. It's a reference book on pharmaceuticals. Um, I do have a couple books from last year, but a lot of books I'm not requesting because I'm just not as interested in a lot of the new fiction books. Or if I'm requesting a lot of books, they tend to be nonfiction books. So we'll see how 2022 ends up being as a reading year. I did join Edelweiss recently, Edelweiss Plus, and those 2 books that I finished ended up being off that platform. So whether or not they're mostly graphic novels, who knows? I love history books. I love nonfiction books. But as I was telling my mother, the issue with that is that then you end up looking things up. Something's referenced, you don't know what it is, you end up Wikipediaing it, and you're in a hole for 3 hours learning about the Jewish autonomous zone in Russia, or Oblast in Russia. So, anyway, let's go on with the recap. Okay, so like I said, in October, I finished 6 books. First one was Graven Eye by Sloan Leong. Graphic novel, haunted, I won't say haunted, sentient house recounting the tales of its life. I enjoyed it. It was interesting visually. The story was kind of like, what did I read? Murderous woman. Am I supposed to? Who am I feeling for? Who am I resonating with? Why would I resonate? Uh, I gave it 3 stars. The next one was The Citadel of Whispers by Kazim Ali. I thought this was so interesting. I've heard of choose your own adventure books, but I don't think I've ever read one. And this was, I guess, presumably the first one I've read. Uh, so I took my notebook. I did a mapping of all the options, so many options, so many endings, which I thought was really creative. A lot of the stories ended not like with a solid conclusion, but just kind of like here's the tone of how it ends, and it's positive or it's you know hopeful or you lost completely. I enjoyed it a lot. I enjoyed it a lot, and I gave it 5 stars. So yeah, who I guess I get the appeal of choose your own adventure books. I think it's a middle grade YA type book, and especially after Netflix released Black Mirror Bandersnatch, and then they have a couple of other choose your own adventure video interactive type things. It's really fun. That's pretty much why I like watching video game cutscenes, because of the story you get, less so the gameplay. So I give that 5 stars. African Europeans by Olivette Otele. I'm butchering names. Apologies for that, as always. Um, African Europeans. African Europeans. I mean, it's in the name. So it's kind of just a history. It's not so much a modern look at like current states. It's more just like looking at the history of Africans in Europe, whether that's Africans, diasporic Africans who settled in Europe, Africans who moved to Europe and became, in different ways, part of European societies, different ways of Africans in Europe. If this was called African Americans, you'd get the sense that it might be Africans in the Americas, but it's African Europeans. I enjoyed it a great deal. I gave it 5 stars. It did say in my review that it was about 4.5 rounded up, but I still enjoyed it a lot. I learned a lot, like this Medici being apparently black, apparently of African descent. Did not know that. Yeah, I mean, or everywhere, we've been everywhere. It's been known. It's just always interesting to learn in the ways and to see it acknowledged. It's always interesting and refreshing. So 5 stars from that for that one. Next one was Siphon by Mohsen Asraf, and I gave this one 3 out of 5 stars. I don't know. Nowadays, I'm just not finding so many stories that are either super fresh in their, I guess, or rather super original. Are there any graphic novels that are super original? um, and even if they're not, like maybe they're not the most original story, but maybe they pull you in for whatever reason. This wasn't one of them per se. The way the story developed in terms of big reveals wasn't exciting. There really weren't any. Good versus evil. Oh no, that's the big bad. When those things get revealed to you early on before the plot even like has a chance to develop, it's not really exciting. Uh, but I didn't really find anything terrible about this. It wasn't anything offensive. It was just a standard story, good versus evil type story, some magic, you know, powers. Good guy with powers doesn't want bad guy who wants everything. Big bad fight, la di da. So yeah, 3 out of 5 stars. And that's that. Next one I read was Red Island House by Andrea Lee. Black American academic marries an Italian man. She's his second wife. They relocate. I don't know if you would say relocate, but they often holiday at his big mansion in Madagascar, and it follows the story from her perspective, from their marriage till about the end of their marriage, as it dissolves. But from the time she gets married to him, and there's like an age difference between them, maybe like 20, 10, 15, 20 years. And, she gets married to him, and it's this whole thing of, I'm this black woman in this African country, but also I don't relate to them the same way. Also, I have this Western viewpoint. Am I acting the same way that white Europeans do when they come and play out their colonial fantasies type of thing? This whole balance of, just, am I being, I don't want to say fetishized, but like, am I the exotic other for my husband? Why are men men in the way that they inevitably cheat and, men? Or man, would the verb be to man? Just an interesting look at life. Kind of weird, um, the whole dynamic of her being this African American woman, but also like external viewpoint, but also like regular interaction in this European viewpoint. So this externalization of the gaze, very interesting. I had my issues with it, but I give it 4 stars. So, and then the last book I finished in the month of October was Brute X by Joshua Dishart, and I thought it was really interesting. It's a bit misleading because the premise kind of leads you to believe that it's going to focus mostly on this cicada swarm and the properties or this air of mystery around the cicada swarm, and it's less that and more of people acting wild because it's an interesting time that happens to coincide with this brood. Murders here and there, just a bunch of men gathered together for some project. I guess men and one woman gathered together for some project, some murders, and then having to cover up murders or not. I enjoyed it. I thought the way the artwork was interspersed with the story was really interesting. And I gave it 4 stars. I enjoyed it. So yeah. So in November, I finished one of my oldest books that I have been reading for the longest time. That reading got postponed, because of all the drama surrounding the panorama, pancetta, panna cotta. Anyway, why are they all Italian words? I guess panorama's not Italian. I don't know. Anyway, what was Global Waste Management by Camilla Pope. I felt so smart reading this book because it's like a legal, I guess, thesis. She's a Brazilian lawyer, and the whole it's global waste management. More specifically, inequality in the division between global north, global south, um, disparities in definitions, control, and enforcement, um, and just where it's lacking and how it can be improved. There were a lot of words I had to look up, like epistemological. I did not really know that word before this book, but after I started reading this book, it appeared in other books, so or other texts I read. Um, but it was really interesting. I think this is the first like legal text I've read. Um, but what the way she explained everything, it just made sense. It's just like, why isn't this being instituted? I felt like I felt empowered not only to understand, I guess, the field of global waste management, but to question, I guess now to question policy choices and actions at that level, maybe. Um, so it'll be interesting to see how things evolve in that sector. I've kind of been like enamored with the idea of waste management ever since I saw this Vice documentary on, I think it's in Astoria, like the New York Waste Treatment Center in Astoria. It's Astoria, Long Island City. I'll link it if I can find it. Um, and pretty much just how poop becomes, or how some not poop, well poop, some waste products become compost. How you have methane generation. I've just learned a lot since that first video, maybe like 7 years ago, um, 7 8 years ago. So waste management, biosolids, all that has just been a fascinating topic to me since. So this was a fantastic addition. It was a bit hard to read at first, but once you got through it, it was like, okay, okay, we're on a roll here. I'm getting it. So I gave this 5 stars. And I do recommend. And I do recommend. Yes. I don't know why I requested this next book from the library, The Decagon Murders by Yukito Ayatsuji. I don't know why I requested it, but I did. Um, a murder mystery, right? It's always fun. Um, it's like a I guess it's a classic. I think it's from the '70s. The book. Um, just some people rounded up and murdered off, one by one. Who done it? Would have gotten away too, were it not for your guilt. You know. Interesting ending. I was in it. I was in the story, and I ended up giving it 4 stars. Um, the motivation. I always prefer when I can. I don't want to say excuse, but I can relate or understand or sympathize with someone's motive for murder in a story. In a story, uh, can't say that was so much the case here, but I enjoyed how everything turned out. I suppose, yeah. I don't necessarily think that blaming someone for someone's alcohol overdose because they were shy. I mean, I guess it was maybe neglect. Regardless, interesting premise. I like the way it was generally carried out, and it's an older book. I just read like it now, decades later. So yeah. The third book I finished in the month of November was The Peculiarities by David Liss. Again, something I feel like I learned last year was about the idea of blood magic. Not that I've necessarily read or can recall reading a lot of books that involve the blood magician, but that being a anti-Jewish trope, anti-Semitic trope. Um, but so I feel like after that I've looked at Kabbalistic inclusion in magical fantasy a bit differently. This was some I don't know if it was Victorian, some English, old being before the 1900s. Whenever some order, whenever these hermetic orders of secret magicians, whatever. Um, it's in London, I think, and magical things are happening. I don't know why so many magical books are set in London. I don't know. It's really weird, and especially when they're connected to the Industrial Revolution. Um, Regardless, the main character was this. Oh, I'm. I don't want to say wastrel, but kind of like I'm the youngest son. I'm the youngest heir of this family, and I am being forced into work for my dad, or work for my dad's company, my now dead dad's company, and him just trying to do his best, but always feeling slighted by his brother, who, you know, the secret relationship between him and his brother, or the real nature of the relationship between him and his brother, you could have figured that out early on. I did. Um, Even though it did feel kind of new when they confirmed it, but you could have figured it out early on. My main issue with this is that the main character spent so much time disparaging this person he was near being forced to marry. Oh, I don't like her and her Jewishness. It wouldn't work socially. XYZ, la di da. Of course, he ends up with her, and it's just like you just spent all this time digging on this woman to then be like, oh, now I'm with her. I didn't like him at all. He was just annoying, especially in that sense. The pacing was a bit rushed towards the end. It wasn't the worst. It wasn't riveting. 3 stars for me, it got. And then because I was in a silly, goofy mood, the last book I finished in the month of November was A Magical New Year Christmas by Anita Hughes. Now, I don't know if I've said this or not before on this channel. I'm a native New Yorker, no longer living in New York, but I'm a native New Yorker, okay? So whenever artists decide to place a character in New York or have them be from New York, and it just doesn't read as accurate, it grinds my gears. It grinds my gears. You're not gonna complain to me about you having it so rough when I have it so rough. I'm so broken poor. I can only eat bread a day. That's because you choose to only eat bread a day. Because apparently your friend, your roommate, who's more than willing to lend you her clothes, has all of these designer clothes. I know you have money. Okay? I know if you wanted to, you could move back home and live fine. But you want to do the New York thing. Poor you. You're so poor. You're always taking the cab everywhere. Oh my god. Anyway, then you have her with this her counterpart, the main character's counterpart. He's this upper middle class type who he runs in those circles. Even though he runs some uh, noble person's philanthropic foundation, somehow he's still poor or not doing so well. What is the standard here? Okay, what is the standard? I don't know. They both kind of insinuate, they both kind of let the other person believe that maybe they're not who they are without correcting it. But for whatever reason, only he really comes under like scrutiny. It's weird in that sense. The romance was cheesy. I don't can't say it was underdeveloped, but it wasn't as developed as I'd liked it to be. The plaza, Eloise at the plaza, this whole thing. It read very Netflix Christmas movie, and that's fine because I guess is what a lot of people look for. Um, I gave it 3 stars. I didn't dislike it. I wasn't crazy about it. A lot of things grinded my gears in the wrong way for me to not give it a 4 stars. Um, Primarily, it was the characterization and just the overall setup of the story. It read like a lot of this is what Americans think of the British. So what Americans think how British people are. And then also like the main character with her whole I'm just a poor New York girl. It didn't ring true to me at all. So 3 stars for me, and that was November. And then December, like I said, finished 2 books. The first one was A Blue Hair in Gunder's Glade by Todd Gunderson. I just I just saw a TikTok that kind of talked about, and I can also try and link it, talked about the way settlers tried to reconstrue the history, maybe it is, as this positive, make it like, oh, there were some. I'll have to link the TikTok because I can't explain it as clearly as the TikToker did, but essentially like somewhat rewriting history and making it less of violent takeover of our land and erasure to more like we coexisted and it was all good. Which is, I've not lived outside of the eastern coast of the United States long enough to say anything about the rest of the country in terms of local histories, but we know the history of colonialism in the United States, or one can know. Um, and the fact that we're in like is it Nebraska or the Dakotas? We're in like per the clues in the story, we're in like 1950s North Dakota. These 4 friends in this, and I think the book is part of a series. These 4 friends in 1950s North Dakota, this melange of immigrant histories, Norwegian, German, what have you, random addition, introduction of this Chippewa girl character without much reference to like any realities of the local times. Like, it's the 1950s. You're not going to have tensions. This Chippewa woman buys a farm, moves there alone with her daughter. Okay, how I'm not saying that didn't happen, but how does that look? What does that look like? And I get it, you don't necessarily want to have the horrid realities of racial and ethnic tensions um, being portrayed fully for a book that's geared towards younger audiences. Fine. It just was like, I don't know how much of this I'm supposed to take with a grain of salt. The story, however, it was cute. You know, young children gathering together to sleuth was what it boiled down to. Um, yeah, that's pretty much what I had to say on that. But so I enjoyed it, but like grain of salt, so 4 stars. And then the last book I finished in the month of December 2021, the last book I finished in the year of 2021, Look to the Sun by Emmy Mears. This was an interesting read. Okay. These two individuals are brought together by anti fascist protests and this love of this book that allegorically recounts recent history, I suppose. It's a lot of queer representation. It being generally an anti fascist story tends to focus a lot on oppression of minorities by the dominant group. I do question why the majority, in what read like a very westernized country, were darker skinned, and the minorities were, there were primarily two minorities. There were the ethnic minority of the Roa, who read as lighter eyed, fairer skinned, and then there were the sexual minorities that for the main characters were just friends and family who they knew around them, so they didn't necessarily see them, they didn't necessarily ostracize them as much as maybe they would be otherwise. So they were very naive, despite the fact that they read this book that clearly laid out, allegorically albeit, but clearly laid out repression and history. But they were very naive to things happening around them. Okay, fair point. A lot of people are, despite a glut of similar literature in real life. Um, but you know, if it's anti-fascist, are we going to talk about other ways, other groups, fascism squanders, religious groups? What you would think would be like a bigger portion of it wasn't so much. Um, it was very, and a word that was very repeated. It was repeated a lot through the story. Social sexual. The book was very much focused on the social sexual aspect of demographic oppression. So, not so many different ethnic groups. We heard about this oppression taking place in other areas of this is a continent, an archipelago of the region. Um, but the main characters were very naive. The main female character, very annoying, because I get it. You have connected to this one person. You want to save him. He's being held hostage, and you are going to go plead with the resistance. Can people help me out? But also, why do you expect people to put their lives on the line for one person when they're fighting a system for everybody else? You're one person, and then at the same time, be offended at the insinuation, implication that violence may be necessary. I want to save him. And I want you all to come and risk your lives to save this one person in the middle of this revolutionary war against this oppressive system. But also, me, a gun, perish the thought. I could not stand her in that sense. But it was a nice read, you know. It was, and it's, I guess, ironic the fact that it was a bit overt in its anti-fascist message, but also the fact that the characters in the book, despite reading this anti-fascist message, were naive to the things around them. So I guess in that sense, ooh, double play, whatever. So I give it 4 stars. But like I said, you know, we could have done more. We could have expanded more questions about choices. But also, I appreciate a good throuple in the story. It's the perfect solution to shipping dilemmas. Somebody wants to ship the would be heterosexual couple. Somebody wants to ship the would be queer couple. Make them a throuple, and all the problems are solved. or whatever. So that's always fun. I give that 4 stars. I'm editing the video right now. I did see that I also finished a sample read in the month of December. I didn't count it among my GoodReads because it was a sample. It was 20 pages of like a 400-page book. Regardless, it was a really solid sample. I think the book's going to be excellent when it comes out. It's The Catch Me If You Can by Jessica Nabongo. Bongo, I apologize for any name mispronunciations. Really interesting. She's like, I don't know if she's the first or she's just one of. I think she's the first Black woman to travel to all of the countries. From what I read, it looks really interesting. The the layout looks really great. Hopefully, maybe they'll have it available for reading once it comes out. The whole book of it, I would love to read the whole book. But anyway, it looks really good. Um, check it out if you like it. If it sounds interesting, I definitely recommend it based off of a sample that I read. So, just wanted to insert that there. And those were the, let's see, 12 books? 12 books I read in the last quarter of 2021. Now, like I said, I have put forth 180 books as my goal for 2022. I'm 2 down. I'm going to be trying to read like a tenth of a book every day to try and finish the other books I have. And then I think the issue will be probably, let's assume that I finish all the books I have by March right now. I'm not requesting enough books. There's not enough books that are piquing my interest. So either I'll have to fall back onto audiobook listens, which may be a lot better and easier for me. Or I might just end up delving into manga. This might be a manga graphic novel book. The issue with manga is that if I'm going to read a manga because I've watched the anime, I don't want to read it because I don't want to get the story before I finish the anime. I would have to find a manga organically, focus on that manga, hope it's maybe finished altogether and hasn't been adapted into an anime, or if it has, I haven't seen it. And then maybe watch the anime. Different things. Anyway, thanks for watching. Might keep up this quarter review. If I end up reading a lot of books very quickly, I might make it a little less than every 3 months. Maybe even a little less than a month. Who knows? Anyway, thanks for watching. Goodbye.